No explanation, no logic, just knowing. He didn't wake his mother. He didn't call the police. He didn't think for a single second about what he should do. He was barefoot when he stepped outside. It was raining, and he ran toward the dark. When a storm meets a storm. He heard the motorcycle before he saw it. Low, heavy, the kind of engine rumble you feel in your chest before your ears register it. Then the headlight cut through the rain like a blade, and the machine came roaring around the corner of the empty street, and Ethan ran straight into its path. Tires screamed. The motorcycle skidded sideways across the wet pavement, stopping inches, just inches from the trembling child standing in the middle of the road. The man on the bike was Jackson Stone Reed. People in Raven Hollow didn't say his name loudly. They whispered it the way you whisper about storms, with a cautious respect born from understanding what damage looks like. The Hell's Angels patch on his leather vest was the kind of symbol that made grown men look away and lock their doors. Prison ink climbed both arms like a map of bad decisions. His face had the worn, granite quality of a man who had seen too much and chosen to feel too little. He was exactly the kind of mothers warned their children about, and Ethan ran straight to him. The boy's small fists grabbed the front of Jackson's vest with a desperation that went beyond bravery, the kind of desperation that doesn't know what fear is because something more powerful has taken over completely. "Please," Ethan said, one word, raw and cracked and absolute. "They have my brother. They're going to kill him." Jackson should have told him to go home. He should have ridden away. He had told himself 1,000 times over 25 years that the world's problems were not his problems, that he had paid enough prices, carried enough weight, bled enough for other people's mistakes. He had built walls around himself that were thick and high and had served him well. But then he heard it, faint, distant, a scream from the direction of the old warehouse at the edge of town, not a child's yelp, not a prank, a scream soaked in genuine terror, the kind that travels through walls and weather and time and lands somewhere deep in the chest where old wounds live. Something cracked open inside Jackson Reed. 25 years earlier, he had heard a scream exactly like that, his little brother's. He had been 17, too far away, too slow, and he had not made it in time. He had stood at a grave 3 days later with hands that shook and a guilt that never fully left. He visited that grave every year without fail. He never talked about it. He never stopped carrying it. He killed the engine. The rain fell between them, a man with a past that could fill a prison library, and a child with muddy feet and a terrified heart, and for a moment neither of them moved. "Show me," Jackson said quietly. "The night of reckoning." The warehouse door exploded inward. Silence followed, absolute and sudden, the way silence does when something much larger than expected walks into a room. Dust settled, and Jackson stepped through it like judgment itself had grown tired of waiting. He didn't shout, he didn't rush, he didn't reach for anything or threaten anyone with words. He simply looked at them, and they understood.
Two of them ran immediately. No conversation, no hesitation, just the primal recognition that they had miscalculated badly, and the only correct response was to be somewhere else. They were gone before the dust had finished falling. Derek Harlan stayed, the foreman's son, the boy who had always believed his father's name was a shield. He tried to laugh, that brittle, shaking laugh the teenage boys use when they are terrified but too proud to show it. "You don't know who I am," Derek said. Jackson reached down and picked up the knife from the floor where it had been dropped. The air changed. "I know exactly who you are, and you know exactly who I am. So let's stop pretending either of us believes you're walking out of here with any dignity unless I allow it." He didn't strike. He didn't need to. He did something far more lasting. He made Derek Harlan feel real fear. Not the performance of fear, not the idea of fear, but the marrow-deep, sleepless kind. The kind that doesn't fade with bruises. The kind that sits behind your eyes at 3 in the morning and whispers, "You are not as powerful as you believed. You never were." Derek left, fast and silent like the other two. And then the warehouse was quiet, except for the rain on the roof and the breathing of a 16-year-old boy on the concrete floor. The smallest person in the room. Ethan reached his brother before anyone else. Liam's face was streaked with blood. His eyes were half closed. His lips moved, but no sound came out, the way people look when the body is trying to find its way back from somewhere very dark. Ethan was small. He was 8 years old and small even for 8, and the weight of a 16-year-old was not something his arms were built to carry. His shoulders were not wide enough. His frame was not strong enough. He lifted his brother anyway. With everything he had, which was not much in pounds and inches, but was enormous in every way that actually mattered, he got his arms under and held on. Blood soaked through his shirt. Tears blurred his vision. The rain was still coming through a gap in the roof. His hands did not shake. "I've got you," Ethan whispered. "I'm here. I've got you. Nothing is going to happen to you." It was the most important thing anyone said that night. Not because it contained information, not because it solved anything, but because it was true in the only way that truth matters when everything has gone wrong. Someone is here. You were not alone. I came for you. In that moment, the smallest person in the warehouse was carrying the most weight, and doing it without complaint. The walk home. Jackson walked them home instead of riding ahead. He matched their slow, unsteady pace, Ethan half supporting his brother, Liam leaning and stumbling, the three of them moving through the wet streets of a sleeping town. Jackson said nothing. He didn't offer explanations or introductions. He didn't tell them about the grave he visited every year, or the brother he hadn't saved, or the 25 years of guilt that had shaped him into something the world had decided to fear. Some things don't need to be spoken to be understood. He simply walked beside them, present, steady, like a wall between them and anything else the night might decide to throw. When they reached the house on Millbrook Street, the light in the front window was on. A mother's eyes. Sarah Cole opened the door. 6 months of grief had hollowed her out. She woke every morning and made the decision, conscious, effortful, exhausting, to keep going, for her boys. She cooked meals she had no appetite for. She went to work with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could cover. She told herself she was managing because the alternative, admitting she wasn't, felt like a door she couldn't afford to open. She opened the door and saw her older son, bloody but breathing, her younger son, barefoot in the rain, shirt soaked red, holding his brother with arms that should not have been strong enough, and a stranger, leather vest, prison tattoos, a face like carved granite, standing quietly at the edge of her porch. Something broke inside Sarah Cole, and something was rebuilt. The thing that had been draining away for 6 months, the thing that felt like herself, came flooding back in a single searing rush. It arrived the way feeling returns to a numb limb, painfully, overwhelmingly, completely. She saw her 8-year-old son standing in the rain with his brother's blood on his shirt and fire in his eyes, and something fierce and ancient came alive in her chest. She was still their mother, and she was not done. The question that changed everything. Jackson turned to leave. He had done what needed doing. He didn't require thanks. He didn't want conversation or explanation or any of the emotional accounting that seemed to follow moments like this. He was already calculating the route back through town, back to whatever version of alone had been serving as his life. A small hand grabbed his sleeve. He looked down. Ethan Cole looked up at him with those eyes that were too old and too knowing for an 8-year-old face, and asked the question in a voice that was completely serious. "Will I see you again?" Jackson stood very still. For years, for most of his adult life, people had looked at him and seen something to be afraid of. Something to cross the street to avoid, something to keep your children away from. And he had accepted this. He had decided it was simply the price of who he was and what he had done. And he had learned to live inside it the way you learn to live inside a scar. But this child had not been afraid of him. This child had run toward him, not because he was safe, not because he looked trustworthy or kind or approachable, but because in the worst moment of his life, Ethan Cole had looked at the most dangerous man available and thought, he can help. And he had asked, directly, desperately, without apology. For the first time in as long as he could remember, Jackson Reed had not been feared. He had been needed. Those are not the same thing. Fear pushes you away. Need pulls you in. Fear makes you smaller. Need, the right kind, the real kind, makes you remember who you could have been, who you maybe still could be. He looked at the boy for a long moment. "Yeah, kid," he said softly. "You will." He rode back into the dark. The motorcycle's sound faded slowly. Around one corner, then another, then gone. The rain eased. The street was empty again. But something had shifted in Raven Hollow that night. Something quiet and permanent, the way the deepest changes always are. Epilogue: What the Town Learned. The weeks that followed were unremarkable from the outside. No news cameras came, no one wrote a headline, nothing went viral. Raven Hollow was not that kind of town, and this was not that kind of story. Not the loud, shareable kind, but the quiet kind that lives in the people it touches and travels slowly, from one pair of ears to another, from one heart to the next. Jackson came back, just as he had said. Sometimes briefly, a pause on Millbrook Street, a nod through the window, sometimes longer. He and Liam found a language between them that didn't require many words, the language of two people who have both made choices they regret and survived them anyway. Jackson began to straighten, not overnight, not perfectly, but in the slow, real way that genuine change happens when someone who has walked the wrong road stands beside you and says, without saying it, "I know where that leads. Come back." Sarah stopped apologizing for existing. She started, slowly and imperfectly, to believe that she was still capable of things, of raising her boys, of rebuilding something, of being more than the woman her husband had left behind. And Ethan watched all of it with those quiet, ancient eyes and understood something that the whole town would eventually learn. Some people look like monsters because the world wounded them before they had the chance to become anything else. Some people carry their damage loudly, visibly, in ink and leather and reputation, and inside that damage, if you look closely enough, is a boy who needed someone and didn't find them in time. Fear keeps you safe sometimes, but only courage, real courage, the barefoot, cold, terrified, running anyway kind, can change things. Ethan Cole was 8 years old the night he ran toward the most dangerous man in Raven Hollow. He didn't run because he wasn't afraid.
He ran because he was afraid. And he ran anyway because his brother needed him, and that was simply more important than his fear. And in doing so, he didn't just save his brother. He reminded a broken man that he was still worth something. He brought his mother back to herself. He showed a town full of people who had forgotten how to hope that sometimes the bravest thing in the room is the smallest thing in the room, with muddy feet and a cracked voice and a heart that refuses, absolutely refuses, to give up. Sometimes the most dangerous men are just broken boys who never had someone brave enough to ask them for help. And sometimes it takes the courage of an 8-year-old to bring a giant to his knees. And sometimes, a single child running through the rain in the dark is all it takes to stop a storm. Paths of Honor. If this story moved you, share it, because some stories don't just deserve to be read, they deserve to be felt.